Hi, I'm Commandant Daniel Iotis, the officer in charge of the Irish Military Archives, based here at Cahill Barracks, Mines in Dublin. Now, as much as we'd love to have people on site, given the current COVID restrictions, I'm delighted to be able to welcome you here to this virtual tour of the history of the Military Archives as part of St Patrick's Festival 2021. The Military Archives hold some of the most valuable historical military and defence records in the country. And the institution itself dates its history back as far as 1924. However, this whole barracks has a long and rich tradition itself. Cahill Barracks occupies a site of over 40 acres here on the south side of Dublin city centre. Originally known as Portobello Barracks, construction began in 1810 and was completed in 1815. It was built as a cavalry barracks, first occupied by the 6th Dragoon Guards, and you can still see the architecture of the old stables throughout the barracks. During the 1916 Easter Rising, Portobello Barracks played a central role in the garrisoning of troops within the city that were deployed to quell the rising. Troops from this barracks were involved in heavy fighting at Jacob's Biscuit Factory, which was under the command of Tomás MacDonagh and is now the site of the National Archives of Ireland. They were also deployed to the South Dublin Union, now the site of St James's Hospital, where Cahill Brugha, after whom the barracks would later be renamed, was second in command of the 4th Battalion of the Irish Volunteers. During the Rising, the barracks was also the scene of the infamous murders of Francis Sheehy Skeffington, Thomas Dixon and Patrick McIntyre. Sheehy Skeffington was a well-known writer, activist, pacifist and something of an eccentric. While attempting to discourage and prevent looting during the chaos of Easter week 1916, Sheehy Skeffington had been arrested by the army and detained in the barracks. Morning, Noel.
Good morning, Daniel. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for meeting me here for the barrack history tour. Can you tell me a bit about what happened on this spot, please?
On the 26th of April 1916, three men, Francis Sheehy Skeffington, the pacifist, Thomas Dixon and Patrick McIntyre, were brought to this exact location and they were murdered in cold blood by Captain Bone Colthurst. So we had to go back to the witness statements and dig out exactly where it was and what happened. And what we found out from that, by dissecting the whole lot, was that the three men were brought from the guard room. They were brought to a quiet place around the back here, around the barracks, and they were told, have a cigarette, stand by the tree, have a cigarette. It must have been probably a damp day, they stood under the tree, and as soon as they did, the men off the guard came out, shot the three men in cold blood, and as soon as they were down, they shot them again to make sure that they were finished off, and then they buried them here in a shallow grave. And this is where they stayed for a couple of months until the British Army went to the parents of the three men, and they said that they would pay for the funerals and pay to get them buried. And that's exactly where it was, in this location here. We also were able to go to the wall, because when they shot them at the wall beside the tree, the bricks were taken out of the wall to disguise exactly what they'd done. So as you see in the wall there, you can see where the bricks were replaced, and also there is one bullet that remained in the wall because the bullet went through the tree, lodged in the wall. So we were able to take that bullet out of the wall and we were able to send it and get it ballistically checked, and it came out of a 44 Magnum, which would have been held by one of the men.
So, Noel, from what you're saying, it sounds like it was a very cold-blooded and calculated and premeditated murder.
That's exactly what it was. He took the men from the guard room. He was ordered that morning by the battalion commander to let the men go. He didn't want to let them go. So he brought them out to this quiet location to make sure they were going nowhere. Their wives and their family were at the main gate waiting for them. The reason why he took them to this location was to get away from the main gate, because that's where the guard room was. And that's why he brought them down here, that it was much more quiet and he could do the deed. And that's what he done.
So how did the crime come to light in the end?
The crime came to light because there was a Commandant Francis Fane out of the British Army. He had heard what had happened. He had heard that they were buried in this location. He went up to the battalion commander. Also, Hannah Sheehy Skeffington, who was very political at the time, she went and she complained as well. She wasn't getting much joy here, but she went over to the High Commission in London. When she started complaining there, they listened to her and they said they'd bring it to court. And that's what they done. They brought it to court-martial, where he was found guilty of murdering the 3 men. Bone Colthurst pleaded insanity, and that's what he got. So he went to Broadmoor for the criminally insane. They said he'd done 18 months. Some people say he'd done a lot less. And after that then, when he got out, he went over to Canada and he lived very well over in Canada.
Well, thanks very much for giving us the benefit of your historical insight into that incident, Noel. I think we'll head up to our next site now. Noel, this barracks has very significant connections to Michael Collins. Can you tell me a bit about this monument?
Well, this stone here, this went under construction and it was unveiled in 2013. It actually came under fold in 2011 that I put a project in to find out exactly everything about the photograph. And I went so much into it, and then when it came down, 2 years it took, when it came down to it, we were able to say we know everything about the picture. From why he was standing on this exact location, because this is why the stone was here, right down to why the crowd were there at the funeral of 9 lads who were shot down in Ballyseedy. This is where the funeral was held, and he was, after being at the funeral, and then he was making his way back to the red brick house where he lived here in the barracks.
And I see to the left of Michael Collins in this photograph as a young boy. I think there's a bit of a story behind him. Can you tell me who he is and a bit about him?
Yeah, the young lad is the one who makes this story a romantic story. And what came over and what happened to him, because he came in here at age 14 and he left a few years later. The army looked after him so well. Michael Collins actually left money for him when he died, for him to be educated. He was taken down to Curry, he was educated down there, and when he came back here, the army looked after him. They got him a job in the post office down here in Rathmines, where he worked till 65. Like, so everything about the young lad brought a good thing out of the death of Michael Collins and everything that surrounded this picture.
And so, Noel, how did the young boy end up in the barracks in the first place?
Well, the young lad, his name is Alphonsus Colton. He ran away from home. His mum and dad moved from Wexford over to Liverpool. But he only realised when he got over there that things weren't good at all. So he jumped on a ship, came back over to Wexford, and then he tumbed the lift up to New Ross. He ended up in the middle of a firefight, the anti-treaty against the treaty. The military lads grabbed him, they put him aside, they said, don't worry, when they run out of bullets, they'll go away. Just stay here with us and everything will be grand. Half an hour later or so, they were gone. They said, where are you going? He says, I've nowhere, I've no family, I've no food, I've nothing. They put him under the truck, they brought him back here to Portobello Barracks, which was named back then. He got off the truck and they brought him in to see General Collins. And when he saw him, General Collins said, what are you doing here? He told him the story about having nothing at all. He said, I'm going to give you a uniform and I'm going to give you 3 square meals a day. What age are you? He says, I'm 14. Although he only looks 9 years of age, when they tried to put him into a uniform, there's no uniform that fit him. But they did start the Army No. 1 band, which they used to take kids out of the orphanages aged from 9 years of age. They had to put him into a uniform, so they put him into a bandsman uniform. And that's why he's standing here with the kilt on, with a beautiful smile on his face. But he was in grey hands, General Michael Collins. On the 17th of May in 1922, this is when we took over the barracks. It was the first time that General Collins moved into the barracks. His house is located where he lived here in the barracks. His office is here where he lived in the barracks. Everywhere he went in the barracks, people wanted to be part of him. They wanted to know where he is, what is he doing, what's happening. And even to this day, people want to know. People join the army thinking, I want to be part of Michael Collins' army. And still to this day, this is happening. This here, behind me, this is the privates' mess here in the barracks. This is now called the Michael Collins Club. There's so many people want to be part of this. They want to be members. And it's all because of the great man that he was.
Noel, it's a very enjoyable barrack tour. You're a great tour guide, so thanks very much. Much appreciated. The Military Archives was set up back in 1924 by Colonel M.J. Costello. Costello was the Director of Intelligence at the time, and he recognised the need for his department to be able to verify pre-truce service for the purpose of the recently introduced Pensions Acts, which granted pensions related to War of Independence service. At this time, the Archives was primarily looked after by a civilian clerk named Thomas Galvin. While the Archives was operating on the direction of Costello, it didn't have official sanction from the Minister for Defence. As part of the process of seeking this official establishment, Galvin produced the Military Archives draft proposed establishment in February of 1925. This is a very important document in the history of the military archives. For one thing, this very thorough proposal touches on themes and practices which are recognisable to professional archivists to this day. The first person to hold the official appointment of officer in charge was in 1935. This newly established appointment was given to Colonel J.J. Ginger O'Connell. O'Connell had been a senior figure in the Irish Volunteers and appears in Leo Whelan's famous painting of the IRA General Headquarters Staff 1921 as the Director of Training. O'Connell and Captain Niall Charles Harrington were the driving force behind the military archives during the 1930s. But when the Second World War started, O'Connell's expertise were more urgently needed elsewhere. It wasn't until 1982 that the military archives was re-established. This was thanks to the efforts of Captain, later Commandant Peter Young. Peter Young was the driving force behind the military archives throughout the 80s and 90s, and among his many great achievements was successfully petitioning, along with Katrina Crowe of the National Archives, for the release of the records of the Bureau of Military History. In April 2016, the current building was opened by President Michael D. Higgins. This purpose-built archival facility was one of several government capital projects known as permanent reminders, built to commemorate the 1916 Easter Rising and encourage engagement and exploration of Irish history and identity through research, arts, culture and education. The Military Archives Reading Room is named in honour of Peter Young, with a dedication under his photo giving him the epithet, the Father of the Military Archives. This building is a fitting tribute to Peter's vision of what the military archives could and should be. This is the military archives itself. The building on the right was a hospital block built in the 1840s, which now houses the reading room and the administrative offices. The building on the left is the repository, where all of the records are kept. So this is the Commandant Peter Young reading room at the military archives. This is where, when researchers come, they're given access to the documents that we have in our custody. It was designed, as you can see, very thoughtfully by McCullough Mulvin Architects. It's all wooden design, means it's a comfortable and welcoming space for people to research. And we have a 16-seat researcher capacity, each one individually lit with access to PowerPoints. We often find when people come in, especially to research family history, they come in groups and they like to be able to talk and discuss things back and forth. We also get people coming in to discuss and research group projects. So for that we have this room here, which we call the noisy room or the genealogy room. It has a few different names. In here, people can work collectively, discuss projects or discuss material they're looking at, and they also have access to other resources that we provide, including our small but well kitted out military history reference library and some of our digital resources, including the Military Archives website. On here you can access online digital collections, you can get access to finding aids for reading room collections, and you can also access the many other digital resources that we provide on this website. The website also gives details of how to make an appointment and book into research at the military archives. So this is the repository itself. This is where we keep the records that are in our custody. Now, this was built to best international standards, and it was a purpose-built archival facility. This is the lower floor of storage. We have shelves here, 16 shelves high. Above us we have the same floor space and the shelves are 10 high. We have just over 21 linear kilometres of shelving in here to store our records and also uniforms and our museum artefacts. The climate in here is controlled. It's kept at 15 degrees Celsius and a humidity range of 45 to 60% relative humidity at all times. We have air conditioning ducts, you can see them on the roof, which are controlling the temperature. The shelves are electronic and stackable, which means we have twice the capacity we would have if the shelves were static. In the floor, you can see we have drainage built in, so because this repository area is subterranean, in the event of a flood or even more unlikely event of the fire brigade having to come and use water, we can get water out as quickly as possible. However, on the matter of fire, we have a gas fire suppressant system. So around the repository you'll find cylinders, red cylinders containing FM200 gas, and in the event of a fire being detected, this gas will fill the cubic capacity of the archive. This means that the fire brigade don't have to come and use water to extinguish a fire, which will be extremely detrimental to the valuable documents in our custody.
My name is Noelle Grothier. I'm one of the civilian archivists working with the military archives based here in Barracks in Rathmines. I work primarily with some of the social history relating to the Defence Forces, so we have private collections handed in by veterans and their families, and oral histories that we've recorded with people who've served with the Defence Forces at various times. We've been looking through some of our private collections to see what material we have that relates to St. Patrick's Day across the different collections that have come in over the years. So we have some pieces here that we're just going to talk our way through. So the first item we're looking at today is a photograph of the 4th Battalion of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. They were stationed here in Dublin in 1916. And this is not the kind of material that we would typically collect in military archives collections. The main reason we have it is because his family handed the material in back in the 1990s. He was a young Irishman from Kilscoran in Wexford, and when the First World War broke out, he joined the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and he happened to be stationed in Templemore when the Easter Rising broke out. So he kept a handwritten diary of his experiences during the week of the Easter Rising, which stayed with him for the rest of his life. After he passed away, his widow deposited the diary and some other material with the military archives. The photograph is taken on St. Patrick's Day in 1916, and you can see some of the young Irish officers there's actually little shamrock in their cap badges. These men all identify as Irish men. They're Irish officers in one of the Irish regiments of the British Army. So this is March 1916, and then by the following month in April, they're involved in the Easter Rising. So this is the diary kept by one of the second lieutenants who's in the photograph of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. So they're stationed in Templemore, and when the Rising breaks out on the 24th of April, they're sitting down. They hear rumours of troubles in Dublin, and they're having a general discussion. There's a line here at the start of the book of the diary where he says that they have a general discussion as to how men will behave if ordered to fire on fellow countrymen. So there was concern in the unit of how this was going to affect the soldiers under their command. There's also an interesting entry for the following day on the Tuesday. He was saying that they didn't have a morning parade that morning because they were having a later church parade. There was supposed to be a mass or a church service the following morning for Irishmen who had died at Suvla Bay the previous August 1915 during the operation there. So there was a sense of things carrying on as normal. They weren't really sure what was happening. They were waking up that morning with the expectation of going to a church parade for fallen Irishmen. And instead they get put on a train and they get sent to Kingsbridge Station, which is now Houston Station. So they arrive in Dublin and they get sent to Broadstone Station, where they're responsible for trying to clear the station and taking it back from what they describe as rebels. And then he spends the week around Broadstone Station and the North Circular Road area, and he describes what he sees, what patrols he's doing, and how the kind of fighting kind of slowly quietens down over the course of the week. There is an entry towards the end of the week where he speaks about they've been advised that Jacob's Factory is going to be fired on, so they're all looking towards Jacob's Factory, waiting for a bombardment to start, and instead the flag comes down and they hear word that there's been a surrender and the fighting is over. So he talks about what he does on the following night then, just the routine patrols around Broadstone Station, and the entries end by when he says that the 4th Royal Dublin Fusiliers are being sent to Mullingar, and that's the end of their service in Dublin during the Rising. So 2018 marked the 40th anniversary of Irish military service in Lebanon with the UNIFIL mission, which is the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. So in mid-1978, a first unit went overseas. It was the 43rd Infantry Battalion. They were there from the middle of the year. So the first unit to actually be overseas on St. Patrick's Day in Lebanon was the 44th Infantry Battalion. So that was in March 1979, the 44th Infantry Battalion. They have a menu here for St. Patrick's Day. You can see a full list of everything that was going to be available on that day with the Irish Céad Míle Fáilte written across the bottom of it. So what's interesting about this item, which comes from a private collection from a retired NCO who had served there, is that in 2018, to mark the 40th anniversary of the Irish mission, we did some interviews with Irish soldiers and personnel in Lebanon who had been involved since the beginning of the mission. And we did an interview with a gentleman called Fouaz, who worked as an interpreter with UNIFIL for several years before retiring in 2011. And he recalled that in 1979, in the village of Tidnin, where he lived, when St. Patrick's Day came about, it was such a momentous occasion locally that the local school in Tidnin was closed, and they were all invited to serve, to join the Irish battalion for St Patrick's Day celebrations with the Irish units. Interestingly, after the dinner, you find that the attendees all sign their names. So there's a few names here that will be familiar in Irish military circles. We've got Commandant Noel Bergen, later Chief of Staff of the Defence Forces. You've got Major General Vincent Savino, known as Vinnie Savino, heavily involved in the Irish United Nations Veterans Association, known as IUMVA. You've got Fawaz, who I mentioned spoke about attending the 1979 St Patrick's Day celebrations with the Irish Battalion for their first St Patrick's Day in Lebanon. And just as an interesting aside as well, you can see there's other units that they served with in Lebanon. There's a signature there from a member of the Finbat, which would have been the Finnish battalion serving in the area at the time.
As well as state records, the Military Archives also has over 1,000 privately donated collections. One of the most significant and extensive of these is the Brother Allen collection. Now, this was donated by the Christian Brothers of O'Connell Schools, Richmond Road, in 2016. Brother Allen had collected these items throughout the course of his career. He was a well-known historian, and he ran a school museum and library. The reason Brother Allen had this historical interest, and there was that connection with O'Connell Schools, is that well over 100 men and boys who had been students or were past students of O'Connell's fought in the 1916 Easter Rising. So it's certainly a school that had Republican credentials. And just to give you an idea of some of the material in this broad collection, I've selected a few items. And these items here, which were recently on loan to the National Museum of Ireland as part of the Proclaiming a Republic exhibition, are an example of two of them. This hurley here was owned and used by Michael Collins when he lived in London. And this hurley here was made by Sean McDermott, who was a 1916 proclamation signatory and leader. While the Brother Allen collection contains a lot of very important and significant historical documents, probably one of the most significant, and definitely the one that gets the most interest, is this, and it is an original 1916 proclamation that we're very lucky to have in our custody. Fortunately, like many of the items in the Brother Allen collection, this came with a note of provenance. It records that this proclamation was handed to Mrs. Molly O'Mahony on Easter Monday night, 1916. Last year, the Military Archives was delighted to be invited to participate in St Patrick's Festival for the first time by the then CEO, Susan Kirby. Unfortunately, due to COVID, that fell at the last hurdle. This year, we've adapted and overcome, and we've been delighted to be able to bring you on a virtual tour in history of the archives at Cahill Barracks. And hopefully next year, you'll be here to join us in person as part of St Patrick's Festival. This tour has just given you a small sample of the vast array of material that we have here at the Military Archives. For more information, please see our website, militaryarchives.ie. Follow us on Twitter for updates at DF Archives, and we look forward to seeing you in the reading room in the near future. Thanks for joining us, and have a great St Patrick's Festival.